Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming along to this forum meeting. My name is Sharon Brown, Assistant Director Delivery, and I will be chairing this meeting. If I could ask, first of all, if there are any councillors attending the meeting who would like to make themselves known, if they could do that now. I am aware that Councillor Claire Daunton is present. If there are any other councillors who'd like to make themselves known, if they could do so. So I can't see anyone else at the moment on my list. Let's come back to that. Thank you. See that moment. So this is the community forum for Cambridge East, and in common with those held at North West Cambridge and North East Cambridge, is a place for an information swap, updates, and a chance to get to know those who are helping to shape a new neighbourhood in this part of Cambridge. We acknowledge that we have some people attending who've been engaged with the development of the sites for a long time, but also that there are those who will have very little knowledge, and therefore the meeting acts also as an overview, and that future meetings will be held every 3 or 4 months. It's likely that, COVID permitting, the way in which the meetings are held will differ as we go on, and we'll come back to that at the end of this meeting. And just a quick apologies there, because we're having a few technical glitches. I hope you can all see me now. The meeting will be a series of short presentations from the key developers. As we go through these presentations, if you have any questions, please type them concisely in the questions and answers function, and we'll pick these up and relay them to the appropriate person at the end of each presentation. This is a fairly tight session because we've got a number of presentations, and it will end at 7:50 prompt. The meeting will be recorded and posted on the Cambridge East Forum webpage. Attendees will not be recorded, but names will be displayed when asking questions. If there are questions for which we need to find the answers after the meeting, they too will be posted on the webpage. And if I could just remind everyone to fill in the post-meeting survey afterwards, and I'll remind everyone at the end of the meeting. So I'm now going to turn to the first presenter, which is Henry James from Hill, who's going to provide an update on Marleigh Phase 1, Phase 2, including Market Square and the community building. Thank you. Henry. I can see the
Sorry,
slide.
Sharon, I was just trying to get it all going. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, can see the slide. Thank you.
Hear me all fine?
Yes.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. So my name's Henry James. I'm a development manager at Hill Residential. So I'm here to just update on Marleigh Phase 1, Phase 2, so the housing development, and that's being delivered by a joint venture as Hill Marshall. I've got a few slides to share with you, and then I will hand over to Prue Rayner of Anglian Learning to update on the Marleigh Primary Academy. So just to start on Marleigh, I've put an image up here on the screen. It's quite a busy slide. It's taken from my sales and marketing brochure, but I've just provided it here really just to give everyone context and a bit of a reminder as to what Phase 1 and Phase 2 Marleigh is in terms of the site. So if you can see my cursor, Phase 1, which has previously been approved as 2 reserved matters applications, is 547 homes, so sort of running up the site across what we call Gregory Park, and then from left to right. And then Phase 2, which is for 421 homes, was approved at planning back in November last year. So 421 homes, that's more of an apartment-led phase. In terms of progress to date, we now sort of have reached a landmark of around just over 100 occupations at Marleigh. And we are now pretty much nearly all complete in terms of phase 1A south of Gregory Park. We're now starting to work through the build phases in the northern section of phase 1, where my cursor is here, and we will continue to move across from left to right over the forthcoming years, delivering out more homes. But the colours of the yellow and blue, numbers 7 and 8, are phases that are both under construction now. In terms of phase 2, that we're currently just sort of going through enabling works for that, and that will be commencing shortly as well. So a huge amount of activity and delivery will be seen on Marleigh over the forthcoming next couple of years. In terms of Market Square, I know a lot of people are keen to understand when this is going to open. We are targeting April, so not too long now. The slight caveat to that timeline is just a bit of an ongoing wider issue in our industry around materials and labour. But we're hoping to get that open in April. That will include the hangar building, which will include the community facility. There is retail elements in this area, so a couple of retail units, a nursery, a cafe, potentially some office space as well, which we're looking at. So it will really start to take shape in a couple of months when that becomes live. And that also kind of adjoins the Marleigh Primary Academy, which Prue will update on shortly. If I just move on to the next slide, I've just set out a few bullet points really for people's benefit of just understanding the key progress on phase 1 and phase 2. I think I've covered most of these already. A couple of things I will just point out. The Land Trust are appointed on Marleigh phase 1 and phase 2 to take on management of the public open space. So things like the Market Square will be handed over to the Land Trust, and they'll be the point of contact for residents. I should also say L&Q, they're taking the affordable housing on phase 1. They've also been appointed by Hill Marshall to undertake that on phase 2 as well, so there'll be continuity there. And I think probably the final point I'll just raise is on kind of wider infrastructure and routes going on. For those who know the site well, you may have recently seen we've installed the bridleway through Kingsley Woods on the northern section. So in addition to what we've delivered previously, such as the new cycle route through the scheme, those kind of wider connections are starting to be taking shape further. We've still got bits of work to do. So other works will be scheduling soon, which will be finishing off the routes on the sort of disused railway line at the northwest of the site. And there'll be further routes to come connecting into the site and beyond over at the Plains area in due course at relevant trigger dates. I've just included as well, just for some context, a couple of drone images. So this is being within Marleigh at Gregory Park, looking back south towards Newmarket Road. So you can see the delivery of the phase 1A houses here, and the apartments in the distance. The school site here, which again Prue will talk about shortly, and then this area of land here vacant that's phase 2. So you'll start to see over the next year that starting to take shape as phase 2 is delivered. Beyond that is Marshall's retained land, which is phase 3. So that will be the next phase of Marleigh in due course. But obviously a slightly different scenario there given Marshall's existing operation. And really this slide I just wanted to put in here just to show context of the build phases 1B and 1C in phase 1 at the moment. 1B you can see here, and 1C, which is to the side here. So again, that will start to really sort of transform over the next year or two. And Gregory Park itself, with the swales and the landscaping, is really starting to take shape now. And here is just one final image I've included just to show you the context of the remainder of phase 1, which, as I said earlier, will be delivered from left to right. Appreciate this isn't quite the right orientation, but from where my cursor is moving along over the forthcoming years. So that'll now, so I'll hand over to Prue. I appreciate there'll probably be some questions. So Sharon, I don't know if you want me to take the questions now or pick them up later. Any preference?
If you could pick them up later, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be useful. And just before we go on to Prue's presentation, earlier on at the beginning of the meeting, asked for councillors to make themselves known. And a number of councillors have now made themselves known in the questions and answers box. So just to summarise, we've got councillors Bullock, Beckett, Bradnam, Cone, Gawthorpe Wood, and we've also got Richard Lane from Little Wilbraham Parish Council, Patrick Shield, Mike Davey and Dinah Pounds present. So very good turnout from councillors at this meeting, and of course that's in addition to Councillor Claire Daunton. So moving on to the next item then, I'd like to invite Prue Rayner to give her update on the Marleigh Primary Academy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here with everybody. I'm Prue Rayner. I'm the Director of Primary Education for Anglian Learning. We are really excited, clearly, to be developing Marleigh, and the image you'll see on your screen at the moment is the architect's image of what the school will look like when it's absolutely finalised. Build at the moment for the Primary Academy is progressing well. I think there's a delay of about 2 weeks on some of the materials in the way that Henry was talking about earlier, but the Morgan Sindel, who are the constructors on site at the moment, are confident that they should be on track to hand over to Anglian Learning in June of this year, ready for an opening in September once we have the DFE go ahead for that opening. You'll see that the school fronts onto the community square. That was a requirement of planning and something that Marshall and Hill were very keen to develop, to have the school as an integral part of the community, and Anglian Learning are very committed to that, to the sense of community that we can develop through the Primary Academy and through the families, but also the wider community relationships that we develop. You'll see very excitingly as well, on the right hand side of that image, there's a strip of woodland, which we had much debate about keeping, whether we could have that within the school site or not, because of the ongoing finance of maintaining it and keeping it safe. We have kept it within the school site. It's a piece of established woodland. I was there yesterday, and I have to say the bird song and the wildlife that was evident, despite it actually being cleared so that we can start off with a safe basis for that work, was absolutely super. And I can't wait to see children developing their forest school provision as part of that, as part of their environment. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I've been missing Chris Whitty. So next slide, please. So in terms of where we are, Anglian Learning have been involved in this project since 2017. So it's been quite a long time. But one of the fabulous things about that is the relationships that we've been able to develop with Hill and Marshall and the local authority around our vision for the school, but also for the community involvement that we have. And our vision is very much for a provision that is fit for the 21st century now and beyond. So we've worked very hard to create flexible learning spaces and to make sure that we can continually integrate and update innovation in IT to enhance pupils' learning, and to take into account a lot of the research that we've been doing into children's development. I think it's really interesting that there's a lot of research showing at the moment that children who don't lead really active lifestyles don't develop the core strength or the vestibular system which gives them the ability to concentrate and focus on tasks if they're not having enough physical activity. So a lot of work, as I've said, has gone into the grounds and developing a curriculum that is focused around STEM, but with key priorities around mathematics, obviously, and literacy. But also making sure that children have the opportunity for a significant amount of physical activity to develop those really important bits of their physiological development. Our intention from the beginning was to create an academy, and I have to say we've had a few interesting discussions about this along the way, particularly with the Department for Education, positive ones. We wanted to, right from the beginning, we learnt from the experience of other education providers who had opened just with reception children, and it just seemed to us to make sense to be able to open Marleigh primary academy to all year groups, so that families moving into the Marleigh development could send all of their children to the school. We have received permission to do that. It will involve an awful lot of review of the curriculum and development, and we're fortunate to have good relationships with Fenditton Primary that's nearby, that's also an Anglian Learning primary school, so we can develop and use some of the provision at Fenditton to make sure that all of those children in the different year groups receive the education they deserve. We're working very closely with the local authority to understand admissions, and one of our key priorities is that we don't negatively impact any of the other local schools. We want to work collaboratively with other local schools, and we don't want to see a loss of catchment children from other local primary schools because a new school has opened, and sometimes new things look wonderful, and certainly we don't want to be suggesting that our education will be better than any of the other local schools. So there is an intention to work very collaboratively there. Can we go to the next slide, please, Henry? We've appointed a head teacher, Mr. Fish, who is currently the head teacher at Over. He's actually been meeting with us today to do some development work around recruitment and how we're going to start with our staffing recruitment, which obviously needs to commence now. He starts with us full time from the 1st of April 2022. We've got a local governing body in place, and if anybody who's listening to this knows anybody or would be interested in becoming a governor for Marleigh, we are very keen on recruiting people who have an interest in the local area and want to contribute to the development of our vision for the school. And there is a lot of information about that on the Marleigh website. The chair of the governors is local. He's involved with the Abbey People Group, so brings a good sense of the local community and understanding of how Marleigh can develop and be part of that. Our curriculum planning is well underway, focus on making sure that science, technology, engineering and mathematics are strong along with the core elements of the curriculum. We want to start our curriculum talking that will be focused, and it will be called A Sense of Place, because we've done a lot of research into the establishment of new communities and the needs of children and their families when they're moving into new homes for a whole host of reasons. So we want to build an understanding of the heritage of the area and really immerse children in what Marleigh is and having a sense of belonging right from the beginning. Obviously we have the nursery with Marleigh, which we're really excited about, a 52-place nursery, and that will start fundamentally the aspirations we will have for all our children in terms of the core learning, and with a particular focus on personal, social and emotional development for our youngest children, so they become very confident in their learning. Can we have the next slide, Henry, please? Thank you. As I've said, community contribution and cohesion are our priorities. We really want to develop those relationships, and we are making sure that all of our policies actually match and benefit, making sure that we have equal access for all children and all groups to the curriculum and to the provision that we're offering. We do know from our research into new communities that they can be very ethnically diverse, and we want to make sure that every family, whatever their background, whatever their need, can benefit from both from the community provision but also the education that we're offering at Marleigh. We've done a huge amount of work and are grateful to Marshall and Hill for their support in terms of the fixtures, the furniture and the fittings that we're providing within the school. Again, they reflect our aspirations for a flexible approach to very high quality provision. And we will host everybody once the school is up and running to come and have a look at our thinking around that. I've talked about the importance of the outdoor learning opportunities and access to all, and we hope to be able to make some of that provision available to our families and community through our out of school hours provision as well. Could we have the last slide, Henry, please? Thank you. And this is actually, it's the penultimate slide, sorry. This is just a quick glance at some of the elements that we're implementing. The top left will be our learning and resource area, where pupils will be encouraged to work independently and access learning independently through the use of IT, but also through a well-stocked library. The top right image there is some investment that we're making into specific provision for children who have special educational needs, who find focusing in a mainstream class very challenging. So we're making some bespoke provision for those children to support them to access learning. And the bottom picture will be our STEM room, where we will be teaching science and technology and developing IT, and certainly undertaking learning in computing and robotics. So the last picture really enhances, if we can go on to that last one, Henry, just enhances some of the information that Henry has shown. It shows that the development of the school, it's the most recent picture that has been taken with a drone, and it shows that the build project is really developing very quickly. One of our aspirations was that for as many year groups as possible to have immediate access from their classroom to the outdoor learning environment. And the only 2 year groups that won't have that are years 5 and 6. And we think that we've created an upstairs area where those children can start to graduate, and we'll start to think with them about moving on to secondary provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. Before we go on to the questions, I'd just like to mention a few more councillors who are with us at the meeting tonight. So we have Katie Thornborough, Naomi Bennett, Councillor Anna Smith, Councillor Dave Bagent, Councillor John Williams, and Councillor Neil Shaler. So we can now take questions in relation to this item. I think the first one from Richard Lane is for you, Henry, and I think you've also got Chris Flood from Marshall's here with you to answer questions. Is that right? Just in case. So the first question from Richard Lane is, what is the policy regarding sale to owner occupiers? I have a case where a true cash buyer who offered asking price and whose offer was accepted but then cancelled in favour of an investor who had bought several properties already. I don't know whether you'd want to comment on that, please, Henry. Thank you.
Sharon, I think it'd be helpful, because I'm probably not quite following the question. Is that a suggestion that's been the case at Marleigh, sorry, or is this an example from another scheme? It'd be helpful just to understand from Richard if he's referring specifically to Marleigh.
So, Richard, are you able to confirm that? Is that possible?
I mean, what I can say, just while Richard may be able to sort of add, is, we're not, from our point of view, it's an open market in terms of who we're selling to. We're not, seeking to discriminate against any type of group, and we've got asking prices. If it's a competitive market, we kind of look at that, but we're not sort of seeking to favour a particular group over someone else. So yeah, it would be interesting to know if that's something that's been heard about Marleigh. It's not something I'm aware of personally, and if Richard is suggesting it is, I can take that one away and come back to him, because that's news to me.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Then just going on to the next question from Ian Rawls, and we've got 3 questions from Ian. Where's the water going to come from this development, given the Environment Agency has said that Cambridge and its surrounding region is currently over extracting more than 1 million litres a day from the underlying aquifer? So starting maybe with that question.
Well, in terms of the early stages of Marleigh, going through sort of planning and design, and the kind of associated infrastructure would have been established. I am aware of this point that's been raised. Actually, I was reading something about this recently, so I can speak to a sort of technical colleague in the next day or so to give a kind of suitable response back on that. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think we've got any issues in terms of the assumptions we've been making. But yeah, like I say, I'm very happy to refer to someone who'd be more knowledgeable than myself on this one to give Ian a worthy response, if that's okay, Sharon.
Okay, thank you for that. We can do that. And then the next one is, how is the extra sewage generated from this development going to be dealt with, given that currently untreated sewage is discharged into the CAM during periods of high rainfall?
I think, to be honest, Sharon, my answer would be similar. I can come back to that. I mean, all I would say is, of course, that we have to model, you know, and in terms of the infrastructure capacity that we look at with engineers, that has to all be modelled accordingly based on the, you know, the number of dwellings, the number of people on site. In most cases, well, if not all, the infrastructure has to be oversized as well, and be future-proofed. But yeah, look, I'm happy to take this one away.
Thank you. And then I think generally it's more of a comment, I'd say, which is about who is actually going to benefit from this development, the local population or overseas investors. And just to say, going back to that first question, Richard Lane has clarified that that point that he raised was in relation to Marleigh specifically.
Okay, I'll have to look into that one then. It's not something I'm aware of. I will absolutely come back on that. I think in terms of the benefit, hopefully that's sort of you know, evident in terms of what's being delivered on site. But not only is that benefiting the residents of Marleigh, you know, some of those additions will benefit the wider public, whether it be infrastructure connections, provision of the local centre, some shops. You know, so there is a whole host of kind of, you know, community sort of infrastructure going into to benefit all.
And I would add, actually, Henry, for the benefit of everybody as well, obviously we'll be developing the plains, which are the playing fields in due course, with the formal playing pitches, football pitches, but equally there's quite a lot of open and structured open space area as well, which obviously the local community will benefit from.
Thank you. So then we've got a couple of questions for Prue. From Bill and Linda Edwards, do you have expected pupil numbers and staff numbers?
Yeah, the school is a 420 place school. It's a 2-form entry school, so 2 forms in each year group. With the 52 place nursery, we don't expect to reach capacity until we reach the end, unless kind of things change dramatically from all of the predictions that are made against the release of the housing on the development. And Cambridgeshire has a formula by which they calculate how many children are associated with different sizes of housing. So we think after the first 5 or 6 years, then the school will reach capacity. So at that stage, it will be a 420 place primary school with around, we think around 50 staff, possibly a few more than that, but some of those obviously will be part-time appointments. In terms of current numbers, we've got 10 children who have expressed an interest locally from the development, and we've also got 6 first place reception children who are logged with the local authority, and another 6 who have registered an interest, but we won't know those final figures until April, and clearly there'll be families moving into the development. We have set out to take children from the development, so we've worked with the local authority to have a low published admission number, and then the facility to admit over our published admission number for any families that move into Marleigh, so that we can keep a cap on that. I think, you know, there is a statutory requirement that if we do have space and we haven't met that published admission number, then we take children whose parents apply for those places. But we've worked very hard to find the right mechanisms to enable us not to impact other local schools.
Thank you, Prue. And then another question for you. Will the school have a professional librarian staffing it?
I'd love to say yes. Unfortunately, if you look at the funding, particularly for primary schools, it doesn't allow for us to have a professional librarian. We are doing a lot of consultation with literacy providers around how we initially stock our library, and obviously we don't want to do all of that initially, because we want to be able to restock as years progress and make sure that we're keeping everything that we're offering our pupils up to date. We will have an English subject leader who will have oversight of that, and we will have a book spine that runs alongside our curriculum, so we have recommended texts that all of our children read as part of their curriculum.
Thank you. And then we've got a question from Councillor Mark Ashton. how many people are watching. Understand, Councillor Ashton, that the number is roughly 42. At these events, it does swap, it does change around a bit, but that's the number. Then going down to Councillor Naomi Bennett, will the Marleigh School be taking pupils exclusively from the development?
I think I've answered that. Our intention is to provide for children that move into the development, and we work very hard to make sure that we've done as much as we can to make sure that that happens. Clearly the school is being provided for Marleigh. There are statutory limitations that mean we can't say no if we have spaces, and that's why we're limiting the spaces that we have initially, and we're limiting the published admission number. And clearly, you know, we need to be able to balance our books financially as well, and we need to be able to work very hard with the DfE to make sure that they think that the school is a viable proposition when it opens initially with the right numbers, because we don't want to be spending a lot of funds on a school that's opening without sufficient pupils to make sure that it's financially sustainable. It's a bit of a balancing act, actually.
Thank you. So I think that concludes the questions we've got in the questions and answers at the moment. So I'm going to then move us. We've just got a follow-up point, Prue, from Naomi Bennett. Will that not hinder children from integrating into the community?
In terms of taking children from the development, I need to understand a bit more. I mean, clearly we want to develop the whole community, and we want to develop our relationships with the local community and with the other local schools. I think our work is, our initial planning is that we will build that a very strong community and take account of all of the equalities duties that we have to meet in terms of making sure that all of our children have equal access to the education and the social and cultural development that they need.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So I'm going to move us on to the next item. This is an update on land south of Coldham's Lane, and Toby Williams, who is the area team manager for our DM Area 2, is going to give this update. I'm going to hand over to Toby.
Thank you, Sharon. So I'm stepping in for Steve Fraser-Lynn, who is the case officer for the application. He's on leave this week. I've got some slides to share with everyone. So the application is a revised application that came in the middle of December last year, and it followed the withdrawal of an application in late summer last year. It's a hybrid application, and it's for land south of Coldham's Lane. So just to orientate people in terms of the site, the kind of central road that you see here, this is looking west, this is Coldham's Lane. And the site comprises 3 parcels, which are labelled parcels A, B and C.
Toby, we can't see your presentation, unfortunately.
Okay, bear with me. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So sorry about that. This is just a perspective aerial view of the site and the surrounding area. And as I was saying, there is Coldham's Lane is snaking along the right-hand side of this slide, and the application site is kind of nestled to the south of Coldham's Lane and is split into 3 parcels. Parcel A is proposed to take the commercial employment side of the proposal. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Parcel B, which is located to the west and south of Coldham's Lane, is proposed mainly for ecological enhancements, and parcel C, which comprises two main lake areas, is the main area of the site, which is proposed to open up for passive recreation in accordance with policy 16. So it's an allocated site within the local plan. And the idea is that employment development on parcels A in particular facilitates the provision of an urban country park. Now, it's what's called a hybrid application, which effectively means that certain parts of the application are put forward in outline form with details reserved for later approval, and other parts are put forward with the detail now for approval from the local planning authority. So in terms of the outline bits of the application, that comprises the commercial elements in parcel A, whereas the detail is put forward for parcels B and C. And you can see from the description of development, it's seeking permission for around 31,000 square meters of floor space. That is a mixture of what's called B8, which is for storage and distribution, but also some flexible office space for R&D or light industry, and then some pure office space on another parcel. So I'll just flick my slide if I can. So this is an aerial view, and you can see from the text on the right hand side some of the main changes that are being proposed. The first point is that the mix of uses from the previous application, the balance of uses has altered, and now the B8 storage and distribution uses are focused entirely within this northern kind of section of parcel A here, which is north of the Tins, and the Tins runs kind of across and through the site here. So the level of B8 has reduced by around 10,000 square meters. Parcel A is to the south of the Tins. There's no B8 proposed within that particular part of parcel A. There is I won't dwell on this plan for long. This is just the extract from the local plan, and it shows the entirety of the parcels as being located within the public open space as public open space, and also the local nature reserve designation of the site. There is a revised illustrative master plan that accompanies the application, and I'll drill into some of these areas in a bit more detail, but this just gives you a feel for the scale of the proposal that's come forward. You can see the passive provision for recreation within the east and the west lakes, the parcel B, which is mainly proposed for invertebrate ecological enhancements, and then an array of buildings within parcel A. So just kind of drilling down into the master plan in a bit more detail. So this is the slide that came in with the previous application, and you can see with the previous application that the buildings within parcel A had been indicatively kind of laid out close to the boundaries with the residential estates, Kathleen Elliott Way here, for example, to the east. So you can see with this current revised master plan that what the applicants have attempted to do is firstly to pull Unit A away from this boundary, and then the biggest changes relate to the units proposed within this southern parcel here, not only in terms of the uses not encompassing B8, but also being pulled away significantly from the boundary with the tins here, this northeastern boundary. There's a landscape buffer proposed between these units, and the access is coming down to the south. This is the railway line here. So the indicative layout has changed considerably. This is another plan just showing the proposals for parcel B, and then looking more closely at the west and the east lakes. The master plan details some of the interventions that Andersons are proposing for the lakes, including some additional access points from the tins and a resurfaced car parking area down here on the west of the site. So where are we in terms of the application? This slide is a little bit out of date, I apologise, but I was looking at the application online today, and my estimation is that we have currently around 500 third-party objections to the proposal. There are lots and lots of objections for officers to work through. Lots of the objections are similar to ones that have been raised before, particularly focused around the B8 storage and distribution uses and the environmental harm that people are concerned will arise in terms of air quality and noise in particular, and HGV routing, particularly the timing of that, given that it's proposed as a 24-hour logistics centre. There are also a number of concerns raised in relation to biodiversity. The Wildlife Trust has provided an objection to the council on the grounds of biodiversity. There are also some local groups which have raised similar concerns to the Wildlife Trust in terms of impacts on biodiversity, and also the brook that runs alongside the southern side of the site. So there are lots and lots of issues for officers to work through. We've had a number of internal consultations come through to officers, but we're still awaiting some key ones from environmental health, particularly colleagues in environmental health who are specialists in land contamination and also air quality. We haven't had the County Council Transport team come back to officers as yet, and neither have we had the Environment Agency's comments. The Environment Agency have asked for an extension of time to respond to the application, and that very much relates to the historic uses of the site, and the fact that parcel A in particular is located over a landfill site that was developed in the 1970s. So there is a lot of technical consultee work that needs to come back for officers to consider. So next steps is effectively that assessment process that officers need to take, and once we've got to the point of making that assessment, then we'll need to kind of understand exactly how to process the application and the timeline for that going forward. Okay, I think that's it in terms of my slides.
Thank you, Toby. That's a useful presentation. And just to say to everyone, excuse my slight croakiness. I've had a really bad sore throat today, so I'm a little bit on the croaky side. So turning to the questions, in the questions and answers, the first question which we received in advance of the forum meeting from Salim Sadat, we have posted into the questions and answers box because you wanted to enable everyone to see it. So I'm not going to read that out, Toby, but you've seen that question in advance of the forum meeting. So I wondered if you and Tim Chilvers, I think it is, between you could respond to that question, please, from Salim Sadat.
Yeah, I mean, from a local authority perspective, can't stop people applying for planning permission. What I would say is that the previous application that was put in really did raise a considerable number of objections and concerns as part of that consultation process. So I think the developers have been in a really good position to understand the nature of the concerns with the development of the site and Parcel A in particular. They have, following the withdrawal of the application, also been talking to various kind of sectors of the community. They've continued some dialogue with officers and technical consultees, including the EA as well. So I think the applicants, Andersons, are fully aware of the level of concern that local population, the wider population that are going to be affected by the proposal have, and that is to a very large degree being reflected in the amendments that have been made with this proposal. But obviously, a lot of those concerns do remain, and it will be for officers to assess the merits of those concerns as part of their assessment of the proposal.
Thanks, Toby. I don't know whether, because I know we've got someone here from the county transport team, Tam Parry, whether Tam wanted to make any comments at this stage or not. So,
apologies, you might notice that I'm not Tam. I've snuck in under the pseudonym of Tam Parry. I do apologise, but I am Jess Tuttle, the interim transport assessment team manager.
Thank you.
We have been looking at the transport assessment. It is effectively true that they've reduced the amount of BAs, so they've reduced the propensity for large HGVs to visit the site. They've also increased the office stroke R&D element, which means that more vehicles, so more smaller vehicles, are going to be visiting the site. In terms of the HGVs, there will still be HGVs visiting the site because they've still got the logistics, last mile logistics hub in there. We're currently having conversations with Anderson, and I think someone may have asked a question about this, about the lowering of Coldham Lane under the bridge to allow larger vehicles to access the site via Barnwell Road rather than through the village of Cherry Hinton, which is eminently sensible. We're discussing that with Anderson at the moment. We've got about 3 options on the table. We're gradually getting to a point where we think we know what option that we'd prefer, because if we do lower the road, there are aspects of the mechanisms of doing that might change how we control traffic under that bridge. They've gone away to do some testing to see what that means in terms of the traffic flows, which we are now awaiting the results of. We've got some questions about the transport assessment, and we'll be forwarding set of comments through to the planning authority within the next week or so.
Thank you, Jez. So moving on to the next question, which is from County Councillor Bryony Goodliffe. And this may be one for Joe Baker from GCP, or Jez may want to chip in as well. So the potential for lowering Coldham's Lane, is there a projected cost for this, timeline, and an indication of who would be paying for this? Otherwise, all larger vehicles over the height limit here have to travel through Cherry Hinton, and the traffic is already very congested there.
Would you like me to take this, Joe?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I've been asked, but it's not actually a question for us. So yeah, if you're able to, Jez, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's no problem. So yeah, as I sort of said previously, kind of preempting this question, I think the cost of lowering Coldham's Lane and all the works associated with it would be borne purely by the developer, because it's something which is an direct impact of their development, is more HGVs wanting to come to the site. Sorry. And potentially through Cherry Hinton, which we don't want. So sorry. So yeah, that would be the cost would be borne by the developer, basically. Sorry, what was the other part of the question? I do apologise.
I think I've taken it. I've taken it off the screen, unfortunately.
Sorry, I don't say there was there's a question about the. I mean, it's effectively the reason is that to take lorries out of Cherry Hinton. We know that we don't want lorries coming through that double mini roundabout and trying to turn through that signalised junction. So this will provide an alternative route. Yes, it will put more lorries on Barnwell Road, but it's a case of Barnwell Road is a bigger road, which is designed to cater for HGVs, whereas the roads through Cherry Hinton aren't.
Thanks. So the next question is, there is no local nature reserve designation for any of the sites. Some areas are city wildlife sites, one of which has already had the vegetation cleared. So Toby, I don't know whether you wanted to make a comment on that. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment.
Oh, it's the comment, right? It's the city wildlife site.
Thank you. So next question, Ian Rawls, given that even the applicant in their documentation submitted as part of their application has admitted that the considerable pollution presence at the site, which is a former landfill site taking industrial, commercial and domestic waste, is already contaminating the local groundwater, how can the local population be sure that disturbing the site to develop it won't release it even more of the contaminants into the local environment?
Yeah, this is the type of the question that the EA are tasked with answering. It's a technical exercise, and lots of people have expressed the concern that through the compression of the land, that potentially new pathways for pollutants will be opened up. So that is a technical exercise. We'll have to see what the environment agencies say with regard to that. But Andersons are they are a company that specialise in the development of highly contaminated sites, and there's a lot of information submitted with the application. So we shall see where that exercise takes us, Sharon.
Thank you, Toby. Next question says from St Andrew's Church, Cherry Hinton. Toby, you've said no B8 south of Tins, but they are reserving Unit D as potential B8 use, I believe. Could you clarify? B8 use of Unit D has a big effect on residents south of this development.
Yeah, so that's not correct. There's no B8 proposed south of the Tins, Sharon. It's all north of the Tins.
Thank you for that clarification. And I think then we've got a question from Councillor Boulat who'd like a, so there's a question from a resident where perhaps a written reply, follow up, interested to know when the community space will be open at Marleigh, and I think we can deal with this separately. Promised last October, then Christmas, then February, so we'll deal with that after the meeting as a separate follow-up. Thank you. So from Bill and Linda Edwards, where will access to the lakes be?
Yeah, perhaps I can just share my screen again.
That would be helpful.
Hopefully I'll be more successful in sharing it this time. Or perhaps not.
I can see the screen.
Can
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
I can't see it. Hang on. Can you see the master plan, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay. So access to the lakes, as I understand it, proposed in a number of locations from the tins here, at main entrance at 1, another entrance at 2, and another entrance at 4 down here. I'm sure I've also seen a more detailed plan that shows an access halfway between 1 and 2 as well, but those are the access points, and from the tins the access is pedestrian and cycle only.
Thank you. So we've got another question from Salim Sadat. I'll read this out fairly briskly, Toby. Prior to submission of 21/02326 full last year, after many years of consultations with Anderson Group, we fully expected it to be similar to the proposals of a few years ago of low-rise commercial units for light industry office space in accordance with the adopted local plan. However, when they submitted last year, what they submitted last year was totally different from those original proposals, in as much as they plan to build the 8 storage units that would function as a 24/7 last mile logistics hub. The claim by Anderson Group in section 9 of their design and access statement document that there'd been extensive engagement with the community for their latest plans as described is simply not true, as it bears little resemblance to their original plans that were discussed and exhibited in 2017, 18 and 19.
Yeah, I mean, really, that is a question for Anderson's rather than officers. I mean, obviously, applicants have the right to amend their proposals as they go through their kind of land promotion exercise, and what is before the council is what we have to consider at the end of the day. I can't really say any more than that, Sharon, to be honest with you.
Okay, I think what we can do is perhaps get something from the developer team following on from the forum to follow up on this. So if we just take that as an action, we can note that. Thank you, colleagues. And just looking at the next question, what can you say in response to the fact that the local community does not want a delivery hub in this location, needs to be next to a major road, away from densely populated residential areas?
Yeah, I mean, that's the party representations that are coming through to officers. I would say that ordinarily you would expect B8 uses to be located next to main transport networks, such as the kind of A14. I think where this will play out is in terms of the technical responses that we receive from, in particular, environmental health, in terms of air quality and noise in particular. and whether or not there are any controls that the council could append to any permission that seek to mitigate some of the impacts. But that is the crux of the issue that's before officers and will be before councillors. I think will be the nature of that B8 use, its size, quantum, and its impacts, Sharon. But I fully accept the general point in relation to where you would ordinarily expect B8 uses to be located.
Thank you. And a question from Councillor Alex Beckett. Has consideration been given to the new GCP network hierarchy review, which puts this site not on any primary distributor roads?
I don't know the answer to that question, Sharon. I'm sorry, I can't answer that, but I can take that away and provide an answer in due course.
Thank you, Toby, that's useful. So I'm mindful of time, and there's still quite a lot of questions in here. So I think what we will do is we may have to take some of them away, but we'll try to deal with a couple more. Councillor Ashton, due to the number of objections and COVID preventing proper face-to-face sessions, should we not look at an open session purely on Anderson's? And since other agencies have not yet responded, we've got the time to do that. So that's some form of community meeting, looking specifically at the land south of Coldham's Lane scheme, Toby, taking it outside this this forum to focus in on the objections that have been raised to the scheme.
I mean, that's certainly a possibility. You know, the council does have the ability to run the development control forum, which is also kind of opportunity to kind of explore where there may be compromise on applications, because the developer has obviously put forward a scheme that they believe in, and that open forum or the development control forum session might be an opportunity to see if there are any kind of further negotiations or concessions to be made in terms of the proposal. So that is something that we can go away and think about in a bit more detail. But you know, it may well be something that that we take up as officers.
Thanks, Toby. I think that would be useful to follow up on after this meeting. Thank you. So we've got a comment from Councillor Naomi Bennett, just that Barnwell Road is already congested, and I'm sure that's an issue that's been raised by a number of the representations that have been received in relation to the application. And then we've got a comment, and this might be something that Jez can respond to. If you lower the road under the bridge, this will send HGVs down other residential roads, won't it? These areas already have too much traffic and do not want more HGVs.
Yeah, I mean, that would be part of the council's response in terms of impacts of the scheme and the modelling on the network, but obviously lowering that part of the road under the bridge will have an impact on taller vehicles and their ability to access that part of Coldham's Lane, for sure.
And then from Councillor Dave Bagent, can you explain, or Jez, what the expected gain is from lowering the bridge?
So Jez has popped up, because I'll let you take this one. You might be able to explain some of the kind of wider benefits potentially from the lowering of the bridge for kind of public service vehicles.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of its so I think in the existing situation, it's going to be able to bring lorries that might have gone through Cherry Hinton will now have an alternative route, but it's primarily a mitigation for any additional HGVs that would be generated by the site due to representations made in the original application or the previous application of concerns about vehicles going through Cherry Hinton to the distribution centre. So effectively it's a mitigation for that, but then it will have a positive effect bringing vehicles from Cherry Hinton that might go through there at the moment if there are any HGVs that use that route. So it gives an alternative route basically, and it is intended to mitigate the impact of the development as well.
Thank you. We might need your help on so there's another question related. Would the road under the Barnwell Road rail bridge also have to be lowered?
Apparently not, because that one's actually higher than the Coldham's Lane one. That can actually cater for larger vehicles than the Coldham's Lane bridge. Anderson, I believe, have looked at that, and I don't think that's the case. I will check, but I don't think that's the case.
Okay, thank you. And then I think this probably needs to be the final question that we answer at the meeting, but we will follow up on all the other questions and answers in here. A lot of them are transport related questions, so we will take those away. They're all interrelated and respond on those, but just the last question, which is really a comment. You say we don't want the HGVs going through Cherry Hinton, but we don't want them on the other side either. What do you have to say in response to that? And again, that might be something, Jez, that you want to comment on.
I can understand that no one wants HGVs down their roads, but it's a question of where we would rather have them if they're going to come into the city. I mean, we need to bear in mind that HGVs come into the city anyway. They have to deliver to existing shops and everything, and you know, a lot of deliveries come in by HGV now. So what we have to do when we're looking at it is say, well, actually, where's the best place to put them with the least issues? Now, Barnwell Road's quite a big road. Yes, it's got some residential parts towards the north end, and Newmarket Road is residential as well. But it's the devil in the deep blue sea, really. It's where can we put them safely, and I think you need to bear in mind that it's not going to be a lot of HGVs. It's not going to be trains of HGVs coming through at peak times. It will be the occasional HGV coming through. But again, it's a question of where is they best put and which part of the network is it best that they come through.
Thank you, Jez. So I think that is as many questions as we can answer under this item. If we have time, we might be able to come back to some of these later on. But I'm now going to move us on to the next presentation, which is an update on land north of Cherry Hinton. And we have David Fletcher from Stratton Parker and Alexis Butterfield from the developer to give us a presentation. So welcome, and over to you.
David, hi there. This is Alexis Butterfield from Paul Thomas Edwards. I'm here with David Fletcher. I think David might be having a little bit of a problem with his mic at the moment, but
sorry, I speak.
David, are you okay to introduce?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, I'll introduce. Do you want to share your screen, Alexis, while I'm doing that? Yeah, so I'm David Fletcher. I'm a planning consultant, as Sharon said, from Stratton Park. And me and Alexis are here today working on behalf of Bellway, Latimer, Cherry Hinton LLP, and the land to the north of Cherry Hinton, as we're calling it, that we're going to talk you through today is a joint venture between Bellway and Latimer.
My apologies, I am just struggling to share my screen. It's one of those situations where you're on a laptop and very hard to get to the point where you can see your screen. Here we go. Are you all able to see my screen?
We can see something which has got design code workshop on it. Is that the right thing? Yeah.
That was the one, just the wrong page. Okay, so yeah, so we'll talk you through this. David, if you want to start and to set the scene, and then we'll talk through the boards.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Alexis. Yeah, do you want to just skip down to the next one? So firstly, just to say for everyone's benefit, this site benefits from outline planning consent, which was granted in December 2020. Following that, very shortly afterwards, Bellway Latimer acquired the site, and our first sort of steps from a sort of planning perspective has been very much focusing on the design code for the site as a whole, and also looking at the discharge of some of the pre-commencement conditions. The real focus for the presentation today is really just to talk through the design code and where we've got to on that, and then just at the end, just to wrap up, to talk a little bit about the public consultation that we're seeking to do on the design code, and the events that we've organised for that. I mean, in terms of the design code, I mean, there's a lot of different strands that come into the document, and we've been working quite collaboratively with the Greater Cambridgeshire Planning Service, you know, principally looking to set the design quality for the development as a whole, with real focus around the appearance of the buildings and how the layout of the site is going to work, key considerations around different street scenes within the development, you know, including key principles around landscaping, along with what are we doing about energy efficiency, you know, and energy efficiency, you know, not just in terms of sort of the built form of the houses, but also all the other land uses and how that sort of fits into the overall approach to sustainability across the site. Next slide.
Hi, David.
Is your computer a bit?
Oh, is it mine or is it yours? I don't know.
I think it's still mine, but just move on to the next slide.
Sure. I've got it on the 1200 homes. Apologies for the technical glitches here. I'm on the summary at the moment. Is that correct?
We've got introduction on the screen.
Oh, my apologies. I don't know what's going on there then. I might have to reshare.
So I can see the summary now, the outline permission, yeah.
Super. My apologies. You've obviously got some gremlins.
Yeah, no problem. So just very briefly to talk everyone over the summary of the outline consent. So it's a scheme for 1,200 houses to include 40% affordable housing. There's 2 schools proposed within the site, which is a primary school and a secondary school. And importantly, a key consideration as part of the outline consent includes a through route between Coldham's Lane, which is to the to the south east of the site, over to Gazelle Way and Cherry Hinton Road. We're also got provision for significant areas of public open space, which is defined as being at least 11 hectares, and importantly, provision for shops and community facilities within the central part of the site. We're at very early stages in terms of sort of phasing of the development, but working out on approximately a 10-year build out programme. And I'll hand over to Alexis to talk more about the design code.
Thanks, David. Right, let's see if we can get this working now. So I'm hoping everyone can see the outline master plan. So the 2020 outline master plan very much relates to that that list of the kind of facets of the development. Obviously, it's showing the 1,200 homes, but also showing those schools. What it also started to establish was a network of green spaces around the development, and they say that was about 11 hectares. And what we've been doing since this time is essentially two things. First of all, we felt there was scope to tie these green spaces more together, so they formed a much more of a strong, as a green network, rather than just individual green spaces with the sort of occasional links, but something a bit more coordinated. And also what we wanted to do is actually find ways of increasing the amount of green space as well in doing that. In particular, we felt that there was opportunities to create green, to make it so that wherever you lived within the developments of so you were always very close to a really kind of high quality green space. So there was a big focus on that at the very early stages. The other thing that we were very keen to do as well is to really look at how we sort of tame the motor car within the development, and be kind of working from the principles that were already established at the outline consent, but just sort of taking them one step forward and starting to really think about how we can make more car-free environments, or very, very much car-controlled environments. So if I go to the next slide, I'm hoping that's going to work. So to kick that process off with the planning team, we first of all had a great day out doing a Cambridge project study tour, and that meant we could go together as a sort of shared group to a whole host of different recently completed projects within Cambridge and the Cambridge area. And it was just a really great opportunity actually to sort of find, essentially do that kind of what works and what are the lessons we can learn from those developments to make sure we're doing all the good things they did and avoiding some of the pitfalls. And then we can see the list of developments there, and I think hopefully they're a really good representation, I think, of the kind of elements we feel that we should be emulating, and, as I say, where possible, exceeding, and certainly learning from. So if I go to the next slide, following up from that, we then have been undertaking a whole series of workshop events, I say, with the planning team, but also bringing in all of the members of highways and landscape, so that we can create, as I say, a sort of a really kind of integrated process. And we've started from very simple beginnings, and we're going right through to quite a lot of not detailed design, but certainly detailed principles about how the rest of the scheme is going to work. So what we did is we started with a mobilization stage. We recently completed what we call the master plan and design coding stage, and that's where we really set those site-wide key principles. And I'm going to take you through a few of those in a moment with some diagrams. That then culminated in a quality review panel at the end of last year, which where we presented all of the work to date, really, and where we'd got to. And what was great is that we've got a really strong sort of support from the panel, and a really good steer for the next stage, which is what we're doing right now, where we're in the early stages of what we call detail. And essentially it's about how we apply all of those site-wide core principles that we've got now. And they take right through from nature and biodiversity and incorporating those to highways design, but also incorporating back to blue green infrastructure, and right through. And essentially, again, it's about integrating design, because everything is joined up. And then finally, once all of that's finished, we're going to be having another quality review panel to show the sort of finished detailed principles, as it were, and that's going to be followed by testing and just sort of tying up all the loose ends before submission. So if I go to the next slide, hopefully this is going to work. This is a magic bit of kit that the team managed to produce. So if if we go to back to step one, oh my gosh, my apologies. So we've got a number of key moves really in the master planning work that we've done, that we did at those early stages. And the first thing was just recognizing what's called the blue-green infrastructure corridors, it's a sort of technical term, but really this is about all of the streams, the different SUDS networks and things like that, and key sort of green open spaces, particularly these sort of edge spaces that were established in the outline design, and making sure that we kept all of those. But the next step was where we really started to sort of hopefully really sort of add extra quality to the scheme. So the first thing is creating these sort of green and linked linear landscapes that move right across the site, both east, west and north, south. And as well as providing nature corridors, these provide corridors for the movement network of safe cycling routes and walking routes. And you can sort of start to see how, even at this big scale, they start to sort of link things up. Then the next level of sort of detail in terms of our key moves was really thinking about how those start to integrate with other landscape spaces, and a tree planting program that will really kind of like get sort of a good tree canopy across the scheme in the long term. Again, these were all focused around the pedestrian and cycle routes, so that wherever you're cycling or walking within a development, you're never far away from passing through another green space. And then finally, we've been looking at how we then integrate those community education and retail uses and all those other things that are going to be incorporated into the development. And particularly thinking about how it means that wherever you live in the development, you can essentially travel along one of these nice green corridors to get to those major uses. So that was the work that we did to sort of evolve the master plan, and as I say, got a really kind of positive response from the quality panel, and has been a really kind of positive process with the planning team. So if I go to the next slide. So then moving beyond that, we needed some sort of, obviously we need sustainable principles, but we needed these to be sort of technically set out. And again, it's about really understanding that sustainability isn't just energy, it's lots of other things as well. So the first thing we did at a very early stage is we sort of made a commitment to say no individual gas boilers, and to move away from gas on the site, so that from day one, everything will be powered by renewable resources. The next thing is, as part of those sustainable principles, is actually sustainable lifestyles and healthy lifestyles, and it's making a walkable neighbourhood and prioritising all those sort of sustainable transport modes, basically walking and cycling particularly. And then finally, as I was just talking about earlier on, it's that urban greening, is that idea about really getting kind of tree cover and reducing hard surfaces as much as possible. It's also kind of, that's fabric first design, so it's sort of high quality building fabric. So it helps us to make sure that the design, that sort of sustainability is actually built into the buildings. And then finally, that phrase climate change resistance and resilience is really important to us, because it's not just about designing for now, but it's about designing for 30, 40 and 50 years time, and how management might change for the site. The National Model Design Code is the latest document that's come out of the, as was MHCLG. But what it does is it's been very helpful, we think, in setting out what they did was they set out 10 characteristics of a well-designed place. And what we've done is we've used these 10 characteristics that they identified for making a great place. And essentially, we're using those to structure our whole design code. So it takes it right through from the context and identity of the place through to how you build in nature, and then how you care for the buildings as well, and the landscapes in the long term. We have an emerging master plan that's coming out of all of this, and essentially it's following all the principles I was talking about earlier. We've got where what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring together all of these various different aspects into this one place. So the first thing is really thinking about the integration of the place, both with the surrounding area, which is particularly important, and also between the different neighbourhoods that we're creating. So in this instance, you can see here on the diagram the various different links and arrows and routes in and out of the site. And also you can probably see how they start to relate to different neighbourhoods and different neighbourhood green spaces. Conservation, one of the assets of the site is actually there's the tree lines, and particularly the water routes through the site, and it's about conserving those and incorporating them really well into the development. And then really it's about identity. And I think identity has lots of different levels, doesn't it? It's that sort of identity of the whole place, as you can see there, sort of related around that, what's called the primary square there on that site, that red area, which is where all of those non-residential and community uses are. And then right through to the little characterful neighbourhoods that can be created around different parks.
Alexis, have you got many more slides?
Not many.
The reason I ask is because we're really almost kind of through your question time. So if you could,
my apologies. I will speed up. My apologies.
Thank you.
So we're bringing together all of the different sort of aspects into what we call living infrastructure, and what this does is it brings together public spaces and resources and movement and incorporating nature into our landscape and street designs. And then what we're doing is then testing that in specific areas around the site, developing up the different areas according to how the code is developing, and then seeing how we can build in all of these different features, incorporating nature, accommodating climate change, thinking about the stewardship and the care of the development, and also thinking about how we get airport safeguarding, but for now, but also if the airport ever leaves, then thinking about how the management of those green spaces might be able to evolve as well. And that's for both the green infrastructure and that blue infrastructure. The streets and public spaces are all being designed to incorporate street trees and to incorporate cycle paths, and we've got cycle paths on both sides of the street. We're making sure that streets are very much designed with the buildings and the street trees and the routes all together. And you can see here in these diagrams how all of those start to come together for the code. We've got our home designs. The principles here at this stage for the design code is really talking about how we make sure that we get variation in the homes and we get diversity, thinking about how we can use design to actually make sure that we're getting really good street frontages and making sure we kind of create a sort of interesting streetscapes that enclose the space. And finally, having a real community focus so that streets again are designed with the homes around them, so that when you leave home you get to meet the neighbours. The other thing that is really important in all of these things is thinking about how sustainable design, as I say, is built into all of those parts, particularly with flat blocks and things. And we're making sure that all of our flats are dual aspect wherever possible. And David, my apologies if you wind up.
I'll just say very, very quickly, just to say we've just launched our website and we've got both an online event next Monday and a public consultation event next Wednesday. Happy to take any more questions on that as part of the Q&A, but I think we'll wrap it up there, given that we've overrun in time.
Thank you. I think I just wanted to make a couple of comments just as chair. I have been made aware of concerns about the need to engage with Teversham Parish Council, which I think is going to be really important in relation to the emerging design code, because there are obviously some really important components there. So I'm certainly suggesting to you that as part of the process, very quickly you do a bespoke presentation to the Parish Council and also to any other local community groups. I think it would also be useful for you to have some discussions with local councillors. Certainly if you haven't done that already, that needs to take place at an early stage. I think the points that you've made about looking at the housing design are really important, because I was involved in the SPD process before the outline application came forward. And I remember some of the feedback from the public at the very early public consultation events that took place at that stage. And there was a lot of concern about potentially you know, a great lump of something like Clay Farm being transported into Cherry Hinton, and I'm sure you'll be aware of the, you know, the flat roofed, the predominantly very flat roof developments in Clay Farm development, whereas Trumpington Meadows obviously a lot more varied with pitched roofs, which are probably more appropriate in a Cherry Hinton and other similar area context. So I think that's going to be your public consultation events will need to address some of those sorts of issues. But thank you. I'll move on to the questions now and quickly go through the ones that we've got. So does the 40% housing consist of rent only, shared ownership only, or a mix? David, that's one for you, I think.
Yeah, so it's a mix. It's just defined in the Section 106 agreement, which was approved as part of the outline consent, and the mix is 73% rented and 27% intermediate. I should say, as part of that, we have got a requirement to submit a more detailed affordable housing scheme as the individual phases come forward, and obviously within the umbrella of intermediate, there'll be a range of different tenures within that.
Thank you. And a related question on the affordable housing. Will the affordable housing be spread throughout the development, not just in one place? Also, will it be of the same quality aesthetics as housing on the open market?
Yeah, so firstly, yeah, so absolutely, it'll be sort of pepper potted throughout the development. Again, that will be partly something that will feed into the affordable housing scheme, but secondly, probably answering for Alexis, but very much is the intention that it'll be tenure blind, so you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a market unit and an affordable unit.
Yeah. Thank you. And then comment from Councillor Ashton. I think that probably is cross-related to the point I made a couple of moments ago. Would it have been better inviting locals into these meetings? It seems we'll be told this is what you're getting and not a consultation as being sold to locals. Will any concerns be listened to, as they seem to have already made their minds up? So I think it's just really important that you do engage with those local communities, with the parish council and with those groups, so that the inputs into the design code and those other processes are really important.
No, I'll just to say briefly on that, you know, firstly, completely take that away. I know Connect, who are working with us on the PR side of things, have had regular contact with Teversham Parish Council, but you know, very, very happy to take away any concerns. Also to say is that this isn't a fait accompli. We do want this to be a meaningful consultation, and whilst we have had, as we said, sort of detailed discussions with Shared Planning Service to date, they're ongoing discussions, and you know, and there's a lot to get through in terms of the design code, and we are very keen to get community and key stakeholders input on where we're going with it, and take on board feedback. So completely take that away.
Okay, and we've got quite a long question about improvements in transport links. Are there any plans to improve the public transport links from Marleigh and the neighbouring areas and potential future development sites north and west of Cambridge Airport? So probably one more for Jez, if still here. There is almost no public transport from Marleigh and the area other than park and ride into the city centre. To access Cherry Hinton, the main train station, and Addenbrooke's Hospital, the only public transport option is P&R bus, often very congested and not able to take all passengers to the city centre, and then other bus needs to be taken to get to the train station, Cherry Hinton or e.g. Addenbrooke's, which can take well over 1 hour. Cambridge Autonomous Metro and other ideas were scrapped, and the buses are unreliable and difficult to get hold of or non-existent. With more houses being built in the area, the situation will only worsen. So Comments appreciated, I think, either from Joe or Jez in relation to that by the
Okay.
more strategic question.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm happy to respond on that. So the work we're doing on Cambridge Eastern access is very much to look at access from Marleigh, from potential development on the airport site, but also from points further east into Cambridge. So we'll be addressing the issues you're looking at. The Cambridge Autonomous Metro as an overall concept, as promoted by CPCA, has been scrapped, but actually the relevant section of it was always envisaged to be provided potentially as part of the development of the Cambridge Airport site. So that in itself would go forward. And as you say, it's important to think about connections down to places like Addenbrooke's, and that's very much on our radar. It also does tie in with some of the comments that were made previously about, for example, if the bridge at Coldham's Lane was the road underneath the bridge was lowered, would that help bus services? I think Councillor Shayler asked, the answer certainly being yes. So yeah, there are a number of things in train, and I'm sure we will report back to another of these meetings to give you a bit more information on that. We have talked previously about it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Another one from Claire Castle. I'm satisfied that moving around on the site itself will encourage cycling and walking, but I'm still concerned about the increased number of cyclists resulting from 1,200 plus additional homes commuting towards Cambridge Centre via the Tins, etc., which will increase congestion, especially at the pinch point of the narrow bendy bridge over the railway by the David Lloyd Gym. How does the Development Council plan to mitigate for this? So probably one for Jez.
Yes, so we do have some contributions towards the Tins and indeed the bridge, as that's a known and recognised pinch point. Also there's money coming forward as part of the Fulbourn Greenway scheme to look at that as well. So the Tins is considered to be a very key route to this site for people getting into the city. So we do have contributions from the development to look at that and to enhance the Tins itself. To cater for the large number of cyclists that we hope will be going into the centre.
Thank you. From Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, we've got a question. Who will be managing the rented affordable dwellings? Could you clarify on the intermediate affordable? Will there be a range of sizes of the affordable? Any information on commercial neighbourhood shops? One for you, David, I think.
Yeah, so I think in terms of who will be managing them, I think that's a decision for slightly further down the line. We're not quite at the submission of our first Reserve Matters application yet. Obviously, we've got Latimer, who are part of the Clarion Housing Group, a joint venture partner with Bellway on the scheme, so they'll be heavily involved in terms of discussions, but it'll be potentially on a phase by phase basis. In terms of the intermediate model, there's a number of different types of intermediate housing as defined within national policy, which includes provision for shared ownership, where it's part owned, part rented by a registered provider. There's a new provision for first homes within national policy, which is the sale of homes of a 30% discount against market rates, and there are also different models within that intermediate model that we'll also be looking at, but that's probably slightly further along in terms of where we're at the moment. We want to sort of conclude the sort of move along the design code discussions, and then we'll work into the detail of our first phase residential application, which we'll really get into the detail in these discussions in more depth.
Thanks, David. And I think that exhausts the Cherry Hinton specific questions. So as we've already moved into the general question slot, we're going to try and answer some of the questions that were left over from earlier on in the meeting, largely related to land south of Coldham's Lane. I'm just going to work through some of those questions. Some of the comments, so from Councillor Naomi Bennett, I ride a speed limited mobility scooter doing 8 miles per hour and can reliably beat the traffic on Barnwell Road. There isn't room for more traffic. So one for Jez and colleagues. Councillor Ashton, we've continually asked for a periphery road that would be beneficial not only to this site, but also the 1,600 homes being built on the opposite side of Coldham's Lane. Jez, I think it's something that the transport team have covered at a number of briefings and also went through a committee process at the County Council, but I don't know if you wanted to comment any further on that.
Yes, exactly that, Sharon. We have commented on this on a few of the forums we held just before the outline, while we were looking at the outline planning commission in Cherry Hinton, and the idea of having a through route or not a through route was discussed in great detail, and the idea of having a peripheral road discussed in great detail. That went to the County Council's Transport Committee, and it was decided that the county wanted a through route, so to alleviate some of the congestion through running through Church Street Lane and Rosemary Lane, but didn't want a periphery road because it wouldn't sort of serve the development well. So it was a sort of hybrid between the two, a through route which is not encouraging traffic through, but if some traffic does go through, then it's okay. I'll just turn back to the I think there was a comment before, wasn't there, Sharon, on mobility scooters and things?
Yes.
Yeah, so Barnwell Road, Barnwell Road is congested. I mean, I think I'd be hard pushed to show you a street or a road in Cambridge or a main road that isn't at peak times. But Cambridgeshire is growing and expanding, and we have to do what we can to manage that. Now, in terms of car traffic, we've got lots of innovative approaches we are looking at throughout the city to effectively budget trips through certain areas, and we'll be looking very, very closely at the amount of car traffic that will be going through Barnwell Road, and we would, be looking to reduce that. So that is something which we'll be looking at as part of the transport assessments, and that's something which we will be commenting on.
Thank you. We've then got a similar question. I think this is really related to the one that we had earlier. There's a lot of crossover. There is really almost not public transport connection from Marleigh to Cherry Hinton, main train station and or Addenbrooke's Hospital, other than getting a park and ride to the city centre and the other bus to Cherry Hinton, which can take over an hour. Underground train, etc. Ideas are scrapped and the buses are getting worse, especially with more houses built in future. Are there any plans to improve the public transport links from Marleigh in the areas? I think that was really covered under the earlier responses. I don't know if anyone wanted to add anything else.
I would also say that there is an obligation on the landlord for Cherry Hinton to provide a bus service to the station in the centre. So that's been covered by a contribution. So we've actually looked into that at outline planning stage.
Thank you, Jez. Comment from Councillor John Williams, which I think it would be useful for you to respond to, Jez. Lower the road under the bridge will impact Abbey and Fenditton. Will this be assessed?
The answer is yes. I mean, we assess everything to do with the new application, and any consequence of doing something, if it potentially is going to lead on to another consequence elsewhere, then that's obviously looked at during the application stage. As I said, we haven't made, or as was alluded to, we haven't made our comments on the Coldham's Lane official comments yet, and of course that's something we'll look into.
Thank you. Another question about HGVs. Will you put an HGV ban on the part of Coldham's Lane between the Sainsbury's roundabout and the Beehive Centre? Otherwise, that road, which is already ridiculously heavily congested, will get a lot more HGVs going along it. This road is not built for HGVs. It's residential with a school and an old people's home on it, allotments and a play area.
So as part of the network hierarchy review that was discussed at the GCP assembly and will be going to our executive board, yes, we will be looking at a range of options across the city, which will involve a number of changes to the network. Coldham's Lane is certainly one of those roads which, as many people have commented, is not being used particularly appropriately. So there's no firm commitment yet, but it's something that we will certainly be looking at, whether an HGV ban or a bus gate of some sort, that we will be looking at what options might be appropriate in that location. And so it's been something that the Coldham's Lane Residents Association has made very clear is a significant concern in the area.
Thank you. And then we've got just a general comment that car traffic is getting only worse. And again, we picked up through the transport assessment process. And question from Councillor Anna Bradnam, will the biodiversity baseline be taken from before the site was cleared of vegetation? Toby, you think this is one for you?
Yeah, it's an issue that has been raised by the Wildlife Trust. The policy 16 in the adopted local plan talks about the 2005 survey baseline. So we will take our advice from the council's nature conservation officer in terms of the appropriate way to calculate biodiversity. There are a number of technical issues that the Wildlife Trust have raised as well, and they're wanting some of the data that Andersons have provided to be shared directly with them. So that is an issue that we are alive to and will seek to resolve if we can.
Thank you. And that I think also picks up the related comment from Councillor Bradnam about noting the Wildlife Trust were concerned about the biodiversity calculation. Thank you. I think, unfortunately, that's as many questions as we can answer at this evening's session. So we will be following up on all the other questions that have been posted further to the meeting, and we will prepare responses, and then they will be put on the website. So I'd just like to thank all the presenters for the really interesting meeting that we've had today, and thank you to everyone for attending, very much appreciated. And also thank you to those officers who've been present and responded to the wide variety of questions. So contact details for the forum will be on the relevant web pages, which will be posted on the screen. And if I could just remind everyone to complete the post-forum survey. And finally, I'd like to say from myself, I'm going to be leaving Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service very shortly. My last working day is the 11th of March. But could I say what a pleasure it has been to be involved in these forum sessions and in the wider community meetings that I've engaged in over the years within this area. And thank you to everybody. It's been a real pleasure coming along to these and all those other meetings. So this is a goodbye and thank you from me. And the next forum meeting will be on the 22nd of June. And I'd like to wish you all a very good evening. Bye.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you.